Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 44.
Congratulations, you showed up. Give yourself a high five in celebration of your success. Welcome to the Cashflow Diary, where new and experienced investors come to take confident action towards their goals. Your host is a family man, a real estate entrepreneur, investor, coach, and instructor. As a master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's Cashflow 101 game, he's inspired many to begin their journey into creating cash flow for themselves and their family. And now, here he is to offer you the tools required to earn the income desired. Your cash flow coach, Jay Massey.
All right, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I am excited. If you've been enjoying the guest after guest of entrepreneurs who have out there creating cash flow in their own markets in their own way, do us a favor. Leave a review on iTunes, because this has been exciting for me, being able to find and just collaborate and understand bigger, better minds, more minds, and looking at different ways of creating cash flow. There's no one right way to do it. As you guys know, real estate is where I find it's at. However, maybe you've been inspired by one of our guests and you've taken some action to follow through with them, and that's great. Here's the point. Do something. Don't sit around doing nothing. Do something. And in fact, go to learninvestingnow.com. Get started today, because it's free and it'll get you started going in the correct direction as it relates to getting real estate done using none of your own money or credit, because you know that's kind of what we do. But what's important to understand is to develop cash flow, because we don't need a pile of cash. We need cash flow. Now, the individual that we are going to be talking with today, he understands the whole idea of cash flow. And in fact, it's amazing that we have even the ability to catch up with him, because one thing you'll find is that amongst entrepreneurs is that we don't often sit still very, very long. And the gentleman I have with me today here, he doesn't sit still for long. And that's great. We've always got ideas and we take action. And those two things go together. And he has been an example of that. He's currently CEO of Accretive Solutions and has written a book, and I love the title. It's Sins and CEOs, which kind of makes you just want to read it right there in and of itself. But welcome, if you will, Mr. Richard Moran. Richard?
Hi, Jay. Well, glad to be here.
Good. Glad that you are here. I'm just looking at everything that you've got going on, and I got to ask the obvious question is, how on earth do you do it all? I mean, I've only got 24 hours in a day. Did you get an extra 2 or 3 or something?
Well, you're very kind, but I know you're a busy guy too. But I'll tell you my secret, and I'm happy to share it. In fact, I tell everybody that there's a disease that goes around often among entrepreneurs, and that is what I call a false sense of activity. It's really easy to be busy. It's really easy to have a lot of lunches and a lot of meetings at Starbucks, and it's really easy to fill up your calendar. In fact, sometimes I look at calendars and I say it's like century at a glance. It's so busy. But the question is, are you being productive? Are you doing the right things? Are you doing something that's going to move the ball forward and help you? And I think that often when I ask people, do you have a false sense of activity? They say, well, I am busy, but am I doing the right things? I need to rethink that. So, my secret relative to false sense of activity is it's not hard. It requires no apps. It requires no technology.
What?
I talk to myself. Yeah, I talk to myself, and I say, what am I doing right now? Am I wasting time on Facebook?
Yes.
Do I really need to go down and get this other latte? So it's not hard. I talk to myself, and I make sure that I'm not suffering from a false sense of activity.
That's funny. I call it that. That's funny. We all have our phrases for it. I call it, are you confusing activity with accomplishment? And that has a lot to do with it, especially when you're becoming a new entrepreneur. You're like, I feel like I'm doing things. I'm not sitting at home doing nothing, but I'm not actually, like you said, moving the ball forward in any way, shape, or form. And what's funny is that I often ask anyone that I coach personally or any new investor or new entrepreneur, I ask them to keep what I call a 15-minute journal. And literally every 15 minutes, write down what you did the last 15 minutes. And it does two things. It helps you see how much time there actually is in a day and how much of it you don't, how much of it you actually waste. And it works very, very well, but that's pretty funny. We all have our own ways of doing these things. So if you would, just in case someone may not know who you are, could you share with us a little bit of some of the things that you've accomplished and how you ended up, writing this wonderful book as well as, being a CEO? Because most people I know, they're like, I can do one or the other. I can't be a writer and a CEO. And that's not even the end of your story.
Well, if I can, I'll take a step back because I had.
Okay.
I think in lots of our careers there are aha moments. There are those times that are both special and instructive, and sometimes they are. It's awful, but that's where you learn. And early in my career, right out of graduate school, I had a great job at a company that I'm sure all of your listeners will have heard of. I was the assistant to the chairman at Atari. Remember Atari? I'm sure all of your listeners played Pong and Pac-Man and everything else.
Pitfall and Frogger.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember those.
All of those. Yeah, all of those games that were huge now are probably on. You can fit them all on one watch.
No, right.
But it was a wildly successful company, and I saw that it was wildly successful, and then it was a wildly unsuccessful company because they didn't pay attention to some of the basics. So I learned a lot there, and I sort of applied that to the career as I moved forward. So I've been in consulting. I've been in operational roles, and what I do now, I'm the CEO of a company with about 700 people that around the country that we do a lot of finance and accounting and IT work. Our family owns a small winery in wine country in California. I'm writing a new book, by the way, and I just think that my role in the business world today is to be an evangelist, and I am an evangelist because I want people to stop doing stupid things. And that well never runs dry because everyone continues to keep on doing stupid things.
Indeed, stupid things. I like this. Let's go with that because clearly I'm just going to assume that when you said Atari stopped paying attention to the basics, there are some lessons in there that I, as an entrepreneur, or entrepreneurs, would-be entrepreneurs, could take from that. What are those basics that we must stay paying attention to so that when the market changes, we can change with it?
Mm-hmm. I think the first, the lesson, and maybe everything else is a subset of this lesson, is that we need to be brutally honest with ourselves about, are we keeping up with the markets, and when we start to see numbers slipping, are we being brutally honest with ourselves about why that's happening and what we can do about it. So I think the lesson that I learned there was the company had been so successful in the early stages that when it started to get unsuccessful, it fooled itself. It didn't tell the truth about how we need to change and get into different markets and start doing other things. And we all believed it. We all thought that it would turn, and instead of changing things, we thought that miraculously we would get back to that success track record again, and it just never appeared. So the lesson is to be just brutally honest with yourself about how the company is doing, how the market is doing. Are you succeeding, or are you fooling yourself by padding numbers or saying that we're only 2 weeks away from that big customer, and in the meantime you run out of money, which of course is the plague of any entrepreneur. If your listeners get nothing out of my call, don't run out of money. You cannot run out of money.
Got it.
So be brutally honest. And I think so many organizations are not, and I think behaviorally, even people are not honest about whether or not they're doing the most important things in the workplace.
Got it. That makes sense. I mean,
one of the things I talk about, Jay, is in 2013, if a politician tweets photos of his private parts, how does he think he won't get caught? Or if a mayor is smoking crack cocaine at night on video, how does he think that's not going to affect his performance? Or the list goes on and on. But why, in 2013, why do I have to remind people about that?
Because people do stupid things, I think, is where you're you're going with that one.
Stop it, and I want people to stop it.
Stop doing stupid things. Totally understood. I get it. Now, what's interesting about that is, there can be this desire, especially when you're starting a business, to go once successful, always successful, and the worst thing in some cases could be having success straight out of the gate without having to struggle to get there. But yet, when we're starting a business, we're that's kind of what we're like, man, I just want it to work from the beginning and skip all that pain stuff. But what I hear you saying is that there's actually value. There could be lots of value in it happening the other way, and it actually could be a detriment to your company if it all goes well from the beginning.
I think that's correct. And I think when you've what was the famous Pearl Bailey saying? I've been rich and I've been poor. Rich is better. And but I think she's also saying that since she was poor and struggled, she knows what it takes to be successful. And I think often that is the case. And I'm in Silicon Valley, where sometimes people are successful quickly and then they cannot understand why they're not successful again. And often it's because they're not working hard enough, or they're not focusing on the right things. So I'm a believer that sometimes a little pain and suffering or failure in your first endeavor will really pay dividends in your next one. And I think also we're living in a time where failure is not seen as a really negative thing. Failure, at least in Silicon Valley, is seen as something, well, you gave it your best shot, you tried real hard, and it might have been a good idea, but the timing wasn't quite right or something. So I think there is I do not see any onus in a negative way about failure, and I think that's a great thing in the business world in which we live today.
I can't help but agree. I mean, I consider myself a really spectacular failure in many ways, which is why, I'm still here. It's because I've learned a lot of ways not to do things, and we don't do those anymore. But what's impressive is what you're saying, and one of the things that always, I think we're trained to do from birth through college, through school, through what have you, is to not make mistakes. And I think it gets in the way of a lot of entrepreneurs. But what I hear you saying is something completely different. Could you say a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I think, I think sometimes it's better to take the risk and do something than say, well, I'm not going to take that risk and always wonder about it. A couple examples. My first book, which I never considered myself an author or a writer, but I thought I had some things that other people might be interested in. My first book was rejected by 8 publishers, and then finally I begged HarperCollins, and I said, I think the timing on this is really good. You should consider this. And I felt like they did me a favor, but that book went on to sell 400,000 copies right away. So all of a sudden I'm an author. So I didn't give up, and I think that we're living in a time where all the kids get medals because they participated, not because they won. And I think that sometimes the medals should only go to the winners because they're the ones that won. And I think, I don't want to get into a big social deal here, but I think that working hard and focusing is still the 2 main ingredients for the success of an entrepreneur.
Agreed.
It's not easy. It's not easy, or everyone would do it.
In fact, there's some, but how I think to some degree, if we told everyone what it really took, they still wouldn't do it because they're like, you got to go through all this stuff. You're like, I'll take the easy course, but there's still enough crazies out there who would go, yes, I'll take it on anyway, because that's exactly the life that I want to live. And I agree with you. Not everyone, I will say, not everyone deserves the medal. Not everyone deserves the win, because you got to put in the work. Otherwise, the win, what is the win worth if everyone gets it? So I feel you. I hear you. I agree. So speaking of books, tell us a little bit about Sins and CEOs, because I'm sure some people are thinking those two titles, or those two go together really well.
Well, I'm not, the thesis of my book is not that my boss is a jerk. The thesis of the book, because there's a lot of books about those, and those sell really well. My book is about, just doing certain things that will make not only your career successful, but your organization successful. So one of the things I talk about is, one of the sins is what I call waffling, which means that, you, instead of making crisp decisions and moving forward, you either delay decisions, or the symptom of someone who waffles a lot is when they say the word whatever. So when I say, should we move the organization into this territory or that territory based on all of this analysis, and the response is whatever, that means that executive or entrepreneur is committing the sin of waffling. So in the book I talk about sins like that. Another sin that I talk about is paralysis. Sometimes, as I said earlier, sometimes it's better to do something than to wait for something to happen. And I think when the stakes are high, when it's your own company and it's your own money, it's often really easy to get into a state of paralysis where it's easier to do nothing than something, and doing nothing is the worst thing that you can do.
Oh.
So I talk about there's just 7 or 8 sins, and what I do is give a lot of examples. It's not I don't do a lot of research. In fact, I don't do any research. My books are all based on all the things that I've just seen out there as a consultant, and I think that what I try to do in the books also is tell the truth about how to not do things that are going to get you in trouble.
Not stop doing stupid stuff. Right. I got it.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned paralysis. I know, especially when it comes to buying an asset, buying a real estate, or getting your business started, there can be that form of paralysis that where people analyze and rethink and go, well, this one's not right because of this, and this one's not right because of that, and they never find out, and they never actually take any action. Is that similar? What you mean by doing nothing? Even though you have nothing at risk, you haven't done anything. Is that the same thing?
Yeah. Yes, it is. So nothing moves ahead because you've done nothing. And I think there's also a sense sometimes, there's only so much diligence that can be done. I mean, at some point, a decision needs to be made. And I think if you follow your instincts, often, even after you do all the diligence, there's still an emotional decision that comes into play. So I think that their diligence is good, but I think it will only take you so far, and at some point you just need to pull the trigger. And I think there's also a sense that maybe something better will come along. Maybe even though she's never paid attention to me in 3 years, maybe the high school cheerleader will finally pay attention to me. And it probably is not going to happen. So I think this sense of if I wait, something better might come along. I think that there's it may be true, but I think there's risk in that. And sometimes it's better to be 80% right than wait for something to be 100% right.
Agreed.
You probably had all the high school cheerleaders that we're dating you, so you didn't have that problem.
No, I was the guy in the back of the room they were throwing spitwads at, traditionally called the nerd. So not
Oh.
even close to that. I don't even know what that world looks like. But what I do know is that oftentimes, because I'm just thinking, I'm processing your information into my world. So many people stop themselves from even writing an offer on a piece of property, or as in your world, I guess that would be writing the business plan, or even talking to someone who knows the language of venture capital, let alone actually asking them for money. Goodness, and then we sit and wonder what would have happened as opposed to going to find out. I like. When I'm starting something new or something I've never done, one of the things that I am immediately after is what I call the feedback loop. It's like no matter how good I try to make it, no matter how much analysis I do, no matter how much research I do, it doesn't matter until the marketplace tells me what they think about it. And they're going to tell me something I don't know anyway, so I might as well start with what I've got and be told that I'm wrong, because I'm going to find out I'm wrong later in some different ways. Or I'm not 100% right, rather, like you said, 80%. And I'd just rather make that decision quicker than, I'd just rather know now as opposed to waiting, an extra even day sometimes.
Correct. Yeah.
That's cool.
In my world, I've often called it failing fast. I'd rather fail fast than just suffer for a long time. And I often see entrepreneurs and everyone in business, they wait too long to make decisions, even though they know what the ultimate outcome is going to be. And when it comes to hiring and firing people, that is almost always the case. People wait way too long to fire people that they know are not contributing. And so I'd rather, my approach on decisions is make the decision. If it's not the right one, I'll know soon, and I will fail fast rather than suffer for a long time.
Got it. Yeah, I can raise my hand in the air for that being the guy to fire too slowly. However, my CFO helps me a lot in identifying that. She's really good at what she does, which is good for everybody involved. So that's great. Now, you've got this other article, which is how we began to even know you out there on LinkedIn, because you're one of the LinkedIn influencers. And I find it interesting in this day and age that you would write. I just find it interesting that you would write this article, and it's kind of funny that you write it on LinkedIn, and that's how we found it. But the article is all about looking up. Can you share with us a little bit about what that means, and how did the article come to be in the first place?
Well, the article, we all see it. We go to a nice restaurant and we see a lovely young couple. They're sitting in a romantic restaurant, and they're both looking at their phones. But the killer for me was, I live in San Francisco, and I was driving across the Golden Gate Bridge one day. And this, for listeners who have ever been on that bridge, it's the most beautiful bridge in the world. It is majestic, and looking around, you just can't believe that you're alive and healthy, and how lucky we are to be in a place like on the Golden Gate Bridge. And I was driving across it, and I saw probably half of the people who were on the bridge walking along were looking at their phones. And the majestic part of the bridge is the towers. It's the big orange towers that rise above. So I got on my high horse, and I put a piece on LinkedIn that said, everyone needs to stop looking down. Let's look up. Let's look up and see what's around us. If you look up, you might make more friends. If you look up, you might get promoted. If you look up, you might not get hit by a car while you're crossing the street. And let's look up for a while and not miss our son or daughter making a basket in the basketball game, or not miss the beautiful bird that flew by. Let's I'm not saying look up in the sky. It's a bird. I'm saying just look up and look around. Not stop looking at your hand with the phone in it. And I got a lot of grief about it, I have to admit. But I still believe
Right.
that our lives are enriched if we look up instead of looking down all the time.
I can imagine you would. I mean, between the number of mobile devices that exist in the variety, I mean, there's so many, and it's like a competition for who can have the most. And I can say that I'm quite the guilty party because I run the entire company virtually, and I've always got my cell phone and iPad with me. All the time. And so that it catches your attention. It's an interesting thought. Now, I happen to have recently, or at least recently for me, been on the Golden Gate Bridge, and for whatever reason, I had taken a trip last summer after one of my speaking engagements where I took my daughter with me, my oldest, and we went, and of course it was foggy, right? Because that's just what it does right there, and for whatever reason, I was inspired. I said, hey, let's walk across. And, being the action taker, not necessarily analyzing and being stuck in paralysis or analysis of any kind, I just grabbed cameras, we parked, and we went. I didn't know that if you walk, you can't necessarily call a taxi to take you all the way back, and it's you gotta actually it's a round trip. It's not a one-way commitment. And I'm like, got a little bit more than I bargained for on that one. Wow. So, but the
exercise probably did you good.
My wife, my daughter and I, we now have a very unique memory. Right. And because, how many of you can say you were walking across the Golden Gate Bridge while it was raining and foggy and you were with your kid? You're like, and we laugh about it now, but I promise you that day not happy.
And I'm not suggesting, Jay, that people abandon their mobile devices. That cow is way out of the barn. People are never going to abandon their devices.
Right.
I'm just saying, learn how to use it, where to use it, and don't miss out on all the good things that are around you. So I'm just saying, use it properly and appropriately. You can use it all day long if you want. We all do. We're all guilty of it. But there are times when you do need to look up, or else you're going to miss something, and that's my message.
Agreed. I hear you clearly because it's oftentimes where at least for me, I'm trying to be more productive so that I can quote unquote spend more time doing the things that I really wanted to do, but I'm doing them at the thing that I need to be paying attention to. And I like how you mentioned, the basketball game, because my oldest plays basketball, and when I think of the Golden Gate Bridge, at least now especially after my recent trip, I was so focused on the photography that we weren't really using mobile devices, and until we tried to call a taxi. Anyway, long story there. But I get where you're coming from, because there's I often tell people in Southern California, I live in a postcard. That's just where I live. It's a postcard everywhere I go. It's kind of easy to see pretty stuff, but you're gonna miss out on the very thing that you hold dear. And it'll be too late, and you won't even know, because you're looking at a battery-operated device at a time where you probably didn't really need to send that text that moment.
Right. That's my message. And but boy, the interpretation for some was we should abandon all of our mobile devices. Now, that was never my intent. So if I don't want anyone from Apple or Samsung or anyone to come hunt me down.
Yes, I know, right? No, yeah, in fact, yeah, avid Apple user here. Love it. Love the stuff. Awesome, guys. We're going to get right back to the interview, and I'm glad that I know, it's amazing how many entrepreneurs are everywhere, and we come in all shapes and sizes, and we have all types of impacts. And the thing that I'm hoping that you're getting from this, one of the things that I hope you get, is that you as the entrepreneur, you're a catalyst. Yeah, you're a catalyst that can cause conversation, and that's basically what part of our jobs to do is to stir things up, and hopefully you can hear how he's stirring things up, and it's causing conversation, it's causing change, and that's kind of what we do. We're change agents, and embrace that. That's for sure. Let's get over to the question. For those of you wondering, if you send in the question, it is to get an autographed copy of my upcoming book, where I go through basically the mindset and steps necessary to create cash flow. And you have an opportunity to win it simply by answering the question. On the last time, the question was, who are purported to be the founders of the Federal Reserve? There were 4 specific names that I'm looking for. Any one of the 4 would have been fine. Carter Glass, Paul Warburg. That is difficult to say. Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Woodrow Wilson. If you've been wondering why on earth does he keep asking about the Federal Reserve, well, the whole point is for create enough curiosity for you to go figure that out. There is a reason. Definitely want to make sure that you understand that. If you want an opportunity to win the upcoming book, you must answer to this week's question. You can send your answer in to 800-689-1764 or cashflowquestion@cashflowdiary.com. Again, that's cashflowquestion@cashflowdiary.com. This one, I'm doing my best to make it a little easy. If maybe this is the first time you're listening to us, go and here is the question. What is the formula to calculate loan to value? Loan to value, also known as LTV. What is the formula to calculate loan to value? Send in your answers to 800-689-1764 or cashflowquestion@cashflowdiary.com, and we'll let you know if you win. So let's get back over to the interview here, and I think you're going to like the rest of it. You've got a myriad of pursuits. I mean, you've already talked about that you've got multiple books, which, by the way, some people call a career in and of themselves. You're a CEO, which, again, some people just do by themselves. You've got children, wife, you self-described evangelist, and now there's a winery in the mix and another book. You help me understand what the winery thing. It almost seems unrelated, but I'm almost willing to bet that there's a story.
Well, if you for any entrepreneur, opening a winery or developing a vineyard is a hard thing to do, but probably a dream for many. And I bet a lot of your listeners also would say someday I'd like to do that. So I have 4 children, and we have we live in San Francisco, right in the city. So our backyard is probably 8 feet by 10 feet. And so we bought a property in wine country that's surrounded by vineyards. And I thought after a while, well, how much damage can I do? Because we're surrounded by the vineyard. So we've developed the winery and restored a house, and we now make about 800 cases of wine a year. And it's very good, and it's more than I can drink, so we have to sell some. So it is not a hobby. It's a very much an entrepreneurial business in a very competitive space. The name of the winery is Moran Manor, Moranmanor, and it's doing very well. My wife runs the winery, so I don't want to take any big time credit for that. She's the entrepreneur who's running that part of our family enterprise.
Nice. And do the kids work in that side of the business too? Well,
they all say they do, but I'm not so sure. They're all 2 are in college and 2 are out of college, and they're all doing very well. But none of them are actively involved in the wine business.
Got it. Okay, cool. That's. And who's? So you just woke up one day and said, "I know winery." Is that how that started?
No, I mean it was like a lot of entrepreneurial efforts. We were driving around trying to get one of our sons who was a baby at the time. We were trying to get him to fall asleep. So we're just driving, trying to get him to finally give us some peace. And we drove by a property that was for sale, and we bought it.
Nice.
So I'm sure that there's a lot of entrepreneurial stories like that.
Indeed. Yes, they're everywhere. But what I like about it is that you listened to what you wanted to do, and you make a business out of something that you clearly enjoy, and go from there. And I find many entrepreneurs try to go, well, what's going to make money first, and not necessarily focus on maybe something that they would enjoy and that the marketplace needs at the same time. So this is interesting. I love it. You're just trying to put the kid to sleep. I've driven. That's a lot of driving if you had to drive all the way to a a vineyard to get them to go to sleep.
I can't emphasize enough the point that you just made, Jay, and that is that if you don't like the business, don't do it. I mean, it won't get better. If you're making money, you still won't like it. And I think that too often people do that. They follow what they think is going to be a get-rich proposition, as opposed to something that might generate some money, but it's also a passion, and they're going to enjoy developing that business. And you just talked about that, and I think that's really important. And I hope that your listeners get that message.
Yep, in fact, that's the entire crux of where I come from when I approach real estate, is to start with yourself first. Many people ask me, what's the most profitable strategy? Should I be fixing and flipping? Should I do lease options, subject to? And I'm like, none of that matters. What do you want to do, and what customer do you want to serve? Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to come down to. You're going to be serving the same customer and doing the same thing, and you better pick something you like, because you've already had a job you didn't like, and you don't want to build another one. And at the end of the day, I find myself, having more fun, mostly because I only do that which I like doing. And, we have the ability to hire other people who are good at the things that we struggle at, and they let them do that, because they might actually enjoy paperwork. Yay.
Yeah. Which is it's another great point. I mean, you need to outsource those things that you're not good at.
So now I heard you mention that at Accretive you said 700 people?
Yes.
Wow. That's amazing to me. How do you wrap your mind around that? Because again, on top of writing books, you've got 700 people. I'm like, okay, you clearly are very effective with your time, but the whole management concept of running a business of that size, where does that come from? How did you? I mean, you feel like you just grew one day and said, hey, I can do this? Or what was the path?
Well, the path was let me take a step back to something that we've already talked about, and that is that this firm is full of very talented people, and I know what I'm good at and what I'm not as effective at, and I get a lot of help in those areas where I know it's not my strength, and I need help. So I spend my time as a CEO in things more like planning and looking at the strategy and selling big customers. So as much as I am tempted to get into the nuts and bolts of the organization, I need to again talk to myself and say, this isn't why I'm the CEO, and this is not the most effective use of my time. So the trick, I think, for any leader is exactly that. Know what you're good at, know what you would be better to delegate. And I spend a lot of time thinking about exactly that, and I think that's why I can do so many different things, because I have a great team, and they don't do all the bad things. They just do this other strategic things that I know I'm less talented at.
Indeed. Now, I have found this to be true, especially, I don't know, about from new entrepreneurs, especially those that are related to real estate, is that we have this, maybe it's a false, like you said, there was a false sense of activity. We have this false sense that we have to do all of it. Mm-hmm. And I find that to be more of a limiting thing than if anything. And I was just wondering if you've ever seen that with any of your consulting, and how do you help people deal with that thought process and overcome it?
Mm-hmm. I see it every day, and I see it among entrepreneurs too, who are often very control oriented. They want to control everything because it's their baby, and if they're not doing it, it's not going to be as good. So, but
Right.
what that creates is just an enormous amount of stress. So, what I like to have people do is just write down. Everybody has a list of things to do, whether it's in your little device, whether it's in your pad, or whether it's in your head. Everybody has a list of things to do, and I often have. I do it myself. I write it down, and then I say, what on this list can I give other people to do who are probably going to do it better than I do, and definitely faster if I let someone else do it. And I think, just like a false sense of activity, I think entrepreneurs are often way too controlling on keeping things close when other people could do it just as well.
Got it.
I like entrepreneurs who sell rather than do some of the things that are not going to be able to move the business forward.
Right. And the funny thing about that is I think something you said that's important is that oftentimes we get stuck in well, I can do it better. Well, just because you can do it better doesn't mean you should be doing it, because they can do it faster. And that's important.
Right. And they can probably do it good enough.
Good enough. Keywords, good enough. And I came up with this the idea for myself about, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I just started telling everybody, well, because what happened, it was pretty funny. What happened is I was putting together a direct mail campaign. And now, mind you, I'm the supposed CEO, but this was my thinking. I'm putting together the direct mail campaign. But I was hand addressing the envelopes. I was stuffing the envelopes. I was making sure the envelopes got in the mail. I was doing all of this. Now, I thought nothing of it because I was saving money. I didn't have to pay somebody else to do these things. In this particular unique situation, my then accountant comes in and just looks at me funny. And I'm like, I'm in trouble. I don't know why, but I know I'm in trouble. I did something. And she just goes, Mr. J. Massey, don't you know your time is worth $500 an hour, and this is not $500 an hour worth of activity? And she just keeps going and going and going. And then later, a friend of mine, he went and he bought a clock like from Target or Walmart or something, and then he customized it, and he put $500. He put dollar signs around each of the numbers, so that and it broke it down. It broke down each 5-minute increment into pieces of $500. So at 12 is 500, and we've got numbers all the way around the clock. So ever since then, I've been like, well, if it doesn't create at least $500 an hour of value for the company, I personally don't do it. And that one thought process alone has kept me from doing some amazing, fantastic failures, because I got other people to do them, as opposed to me trying to do it all myself. That one little idea. So you're right. It's funny how much you can accomplish when you've got a killer team, and it's clearly there's no other way you could do this without a killer team.
That is just such an example of it never was cheaper. From the start, it never was cheaper for you to do that.
Right.
And I think that's the way everybody needs to look at the business. Sometimes there is no that you have to ask yourself, how much is this costing the organization for me to do this?
Right.
And that it's often cheaper to get other people to do it.
Indeed. And it's something I don't know about you, but I tend to have to relearn my lessons. I don't get them the first time. I get versions of them, but I have to get them over time, which is very, very interesting, at least to me. So that's good. Now, I'm curious. You having had exposure to so many different entrepreneurs, if you were to give an entrepreneur or someone who is not yet an entrepreneur, or at least hasn't the external evidence of being an entrepreneur, but they're ready to to embark on that journey, what would be the advice you would give them? Like, is there a specific order that you would say, do 1, 2, 3, and think this way, and tell them go?
I would start out by telling any entrepreneur that they need to be able to tell a story. They need to be able to tell a very good story about their idea. And it is a mistake that I see so many make, where I will meet someone, or someone will be about to give a presentation who says, I have a great idea for a new business. And I'll say, great, what is it? And 10 minutes later, they're still talking, and I don't know what it is. And I see that especially in technology.
Right.
So I think rule number one is you really need to be able to describe what it is, whether it's an idea or a product or something new. Idea number one is if you can't describe it, it probably isn't ready for any kind of fundraising.
Wow.
When you do describe it, now you're ready, but you need to be able to talk about how big is it, what does it do, who will buy it, all those kinds of things. So before anybody even talks about money, I think there's a lot of hard questions that entrepreneurs need to ask themselves, but the biggest one is, what is it?
Wow. You can't imagine. I know you haven't listened to all the other episodes, but you can't imagine how excited I am that you said exactly that. Because people ask me all the time, how do I access capital for my transactions, and how do you buy a 182 unit building or commercial buildings in various places? And you in like 2 minutes just told them exactly what I must do. I must go out there and tell that story, cast that vision, and then later focus on the how it's going to get done. And I often teach people that there's 5 questions that you need to answer. And once you've answered these 5 questions in this order, you're able to go talk to people and make this happen. And it's just why, what, when, who, and how being the last piece. But when you answer all those other ones, you're ready to go attract capital. And I'm floored that I've got like goosebumps and stuff. It's like awesome. You just said this. I couldn't have said it better. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm assuming you sat through some very horrible presentations, 1 or 2.
Many, hundreds, and it always puts the investor in an awkward situation, because at the end of a presentation, often I would love to tell the entrepreneur what is good or bad about the idea, but often entrepreneurs are unwilling to hear it at that time, because in effect I'm telling them that their baby is ugly. And so it's hard. I find that entrepreneurs sometimes, the good ones are ready to be coached. The ones that are tougher to deal with are the ones who think that they have it down and they don't need any coaching. But I've found that often in those meetings when entrepreneurs are pitching ideas, that they're unwilling to hear any coaching or any criticism. And I wish that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I'm stumbling over my words, because it's the very thing that I believe has made a difference for myself. It's, there's nothing, in my opinion, about me externally that should have made it happen, so to speak, except that I just did what people told me to do. And when they said shift, I shift, because I don't know everything. My team, I strive to be in their area, I try to be the dumbest person on the team. I don't want to know all the answers. I want other people to give me that input. And I often tell a new entrepreneur the first thing to do is go to Toastmasters, learn to speak so that you can communicate, but don't just go and join and participate in their competitions, because when you participate in the competitions, you're being critiqued by some people who have seen some of the best speakers in your area, and you get better faster because of the input you receive. And so few people are willing to do that because that input, it's like you said, my baby is ugly, which, by the way, I've never heard anyone say, "Ooh, look at your ugly baby." But yeah, I hear you. That would be interesting if someone actually did that. But it's amazing how much faster you can grow when you're willing to accept that information. Like one of my own personal, frustrations, especially when it comes to real estate, is that no one is taken as the real estate software user. I'm the user, but every piece of real estate software out there is not made for the guy who is not made by the user. It's made by a person who may have done a deal once. And it's like, okay, this is awesome, but it's not made by the user. And I'm like, there are so many holes in much of the software that I see. It's just like, and the challenge is once you become an entrepreneur in any one area, you got too many ideas that you can do. It's just interesting to me you are the one who sits on the other sides of other people's ideas, and you're the best person that could tell them how to improve their idea. So now I've got to ask, do you watch the show Shark Tank perchance? I'm just curious. Do you even know what that is?
Yeah, I have. I've seen it. Yeah. It's not quite that animated, but but it's not that far off of what really happens.
Right.
It is people. I know it's TV and it's dramatic, but I've sat in entrepreneur presentations where there's a shot clock in the back, just like in basketball, and you have 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is, and when that buzzer goes off, you're done. Game's over.
Wow.
So so Shark Tank every entrepreneur should watch that and then discount it by 20%, but that's not far off from the way it really works.
It's like a family event over here. My wife was talking. She said, "Yeah, that's good entertainment." I'm like, "That's not entertainment. That's education." It's awesome.
Should be.
It's awesome. In fact, it's so much so. One of the things that I want to help make happen is that I want entrepreneurs to be able to learn how to tell their story and get their deals funded, et cetera, et cetera. So what I've started doing is what I call live deal reviews, where people send in their deals, and I coach them on, this is what you need, this is why this deal works, this is why it doesn't. Go fix these things, then you'll be able to go get your money. And people get to watch me do that live real time because I don't know what the deals are going to be. And I'm not offering to fund any of them. That's not the goal. The goal is to train people with the skill set of, like you said, learning how to tell the story. I'm like, you could have said anything. And it's just amazing to me that was like the thing you would say. And because so many times in entrepreneurs that I run into, they say, well, I need to have the money first, or I need to have this first. I need to have whatever first. There's always something else that they need to have first other than a clear idea.
Right. It's never the idea that gets funded. It's the entrepreneur that gets funded. And if the entrepreneur cannot tell the story to the investors, he or she is not going to be able to tell the story to customers or future employees who are going to make the company successful. So it's very, very, very important.
Awesome. So is there anything else in general that you would like to share before we get close to the end here?
Yeah, just before it sounds like I'm being critical of anything or any process. I believe that investors, including myself, every time I meet an entrepreneur, I cheer for that entrepreneur. I want that entrepreneur to be successful, whether I invest or not. I'm the biggest fan of the entrepreneur because I know how hard it is, and I know that their spouse is probably yelling at them, and their Visa card is probably too high. So don't go into meetings, I'm talking now to the entrepreneurs, thinking that this is awful and they hate me. My experience is that investors cheer for entrepreneurs. They want them to be successful, but you just need to meet them halfway by having fleshed out the good ideas and the content and the numbers in a way that they can fund it rather than just cheer for you.
Nice. Well put. And if any of us want to contact you further, what is the simplest or easiest way to be able to do that? We know that you're on LinkedIn because you write great articles. Is there any other way that we could actually catch up with you?
LinkedIn is an easy way, or go to the website richardmoran.com. But LinkedIn actually works, and people like myself, we read the comments and we read messages that we receive on LinkedIn.
Awesome. I definitely appreciate you investing the time here. Hopefully you found it helpful and fruitful as well. And thank you for all that you're doing. Keep writing excellent articles, excellent books, so that we don't do stupid stuff.
Jay, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for investing your time with Jay Massey and the Cash Flow Diary. When you have a moment, please visit iTunes and leave a positive comment about the show. And go now to our website, cashflowdiary.com, to take advantage of our free business building course, Cash Flow Foundation. Gain the knowledge, understanding, and skill that will teach you how to never need a job again. Until next time.